up and carried in various directions and scattered. They never did find the head, but they did know it was Johanna because they picked up something in the ashes and it disintegrated. And this particular thing happened to be her braid. She had very long hair, and each night she probably would have young Bridget braid her hair. It had a pin in it, and it was very long, and in the ashes, as they picked it up, it disintegrated, and they said, "My goodness, this is Johanna. This is how she put up her hair." The most well-preserved body was that of Tom. It had sunk down through the floor, and if you pardon the expression, was still cooking on the apples, potatoes, and cabbages. It had sunk through, and the pressure of the pile of food underneath on the back of the spine caused the head and the arms to separate naturally and just move to one side. This occurs if you take a chicken or a turkey and you put it in a big pot, and after a period of time it will collapse and move to one side. The coroner also observed Robert Donnelly arrived here from St. Thomas, and he was witness to kneel down and lean forward and cry, the tears dripping on the blackened body of his brother, and he also was seen to kiss the burnt exposed liver of his brother. When the coroner got finished with the bodies, he instructed the undertaker that you can do what you can, and he took the 4 bodies here, rolled them into newspapers, and literally stuffed them into one coffin. When the vigilantes left here, they went up the road, they turned right just past Grouchy Rider's place, went 1.25 miles over to Highway 23, and then turned left and went north again 1.25 miles to a little tiny spot in the road today called Whalen, or Whalen's Corners. There, William was living. William got married in 1875 to Nora Kennedy. She was a very deaf girl, and in 1880 they were expecting their first child. Nora went to bed early and that night, and William came to bed. He apparently smacked her on the backside and hollered in her ear, being so deaf, "Move over, Nora." She said, I won't. You can climb over to the back of the bed. She had her side all warmed up. Probably contributed a great deal to saving his life, because when the vigilantes arrived, they were a lot sober at this point. There were fewer this time. Some went home, and they were rather nervous. They decided to go out to the rented barn and beat up William's prize stallion named Jack's Alive, thinking that when the horse was crying, whinnying, and neighing, that William would hear this and come out, and they just bop him on the head. They beat the horse up, but no one was awakened. So then, in desperation, they went to the side door of the rented house, pounded on it, and said to somebody to the effect, "William, open up, there's a fire." In the next bedroom, William's brother, John, whom he called Jack, jumped out of bed, being a light sleeper, came through and lit a candle, and very quickly said, "William, someone's calling your name and saying that there's a fire." He went to the door, opened it up, and the rather nervous vigilantes thought it was William because the light was behind him. They opened up with a shotgun and shot John just under the chin, and let go with a rifle bullet. Went clean through him and lodged in the wall. William dug that out the next day. Nora blew out the candle, and Martin Hogan, a friend of the family also in the next bedroom, came through and said, "William, it's you that they want. It has to be." So everyone was quiet. They lay there, and Martin and Nora carefully pulled John all the way in and pushed the door shut. William looked out and recognized a number of vigilantes outside, including his own brother-in-law, Nora's brother, Jack Kennedy. Jack hated William for marrying Nora. He was very jealous of him. They lay there till the sun came up. The men went home outside. They decided that they had done enough that day. Well, the next day, I guess all hell broke loose, because Johnny O'Connor and William went into Lucan and then into London, where they told their story to the magistrates. And it didn't take long to round up the vigilantes, And by the time the court case was worked up, it was September. In fact, it was Queen Victoria versus James Carroll for the murder of Johanna Donnelly. There were 6 men in the docket. This first trial jury couldn't decide. They let the jury go. They got a new jury. It is now January 1881, and this second jury finds James Carroll not guilty. If James Carroll is the big banana, the head kahuna, the head honcho, if he's found not guilty, what about the other 5? They let them go. They came up to Lucan, where for several weeks there weren't enough nights in the week for partying. They asked for and eventually got their weapons back from the London Police Department. This left 4 family members surviving, and I'll allude 1 minute here to something. In 1842, when James and Johanna came over from Tipperary, they brought with them their firstborn, James Jr. He lived to be 35 years of age and died in this house of tuberculosis. He was also an alcoholic. In 1879, not quite 2 years later, another son, this one married with 2 children, Michael. Michael was down in Waterford, Ontario, spending the night working for the railroad, and he was spending the night in Slat's Hotel, and another man by the name of Lewis, also from Biddulph, working for the railroad, goaded him into a fight by mistreating a dog. When poor Mike went to throw a punch with saying something to the effect, "That's no way to treat any animal," Lewis pulled a rather large knife and stabbed him, severed the femoral artery, and Mike died in the bathroom within a few minutes. He was laid out here also, like his brother back in 1877, for a wake, and was buried up the road. The night of the massacre, not quite 2 months later, in February the 4th, 1880, the father, the mother, the one son here, the niece, and the other son over at Wayland were killed. This left William over at the back of the bed, Robert visiting his sister Jenny, and there was Patrick. Patrick now left the family at a very early age and had become a blacksmith in partnership with a man by the name of Becker, and was a carriage maker living down in Thorold, Ontario. They came up for the funerals and the trials, and when it was over, Jenny and Patrick both went back to their respective families. Robert went back to his wife of no children, back working in Lucan at the hotel for a period of time. But William, during that whole year of the trials, funerals and the trials, he packed his wife and the baby that came along shortly after off to her parents and slept unannounced a different place every night. When it was over, William felt that this area here was consecrated. It had the blood, the ashes, the bones, the remains of his parents, his cousin, his brother. He didn't want it disturbed. He planted 5 horse chestnut seedlings. 3 did not survive, but 2 have grown to become these rather large horse chestnut trees. He put up a split cedar rail fence around it, which is now gone. And even though he didn't have much money at the time, over a period of time, he and his brother Robert managed to purchase the south 50 acres, which had been taken away from their father. And the house, of course, that was there was lifted up, rolled into place here, put on a new poured cement foundation, and put on the same spot practically where their father had built their first Irish shanty back in 1845.